I'd like to welcome you to this presentation this morning and say that how thrilled we are to have it. And I just want to recognize Tracy Quazans for kind of planting the seed on this. It just shows you where an idea can be taken and worked upon and so on. And she made the original contact and brought the idea to the board. So I'd like to recognize her for her searching out yourself and then the presentations you've made in the past and so on. So with no further ado, I'll just leave it with you. Thank you very much and welcome. Thanks for having us this morning.
Hey, thank you, Terry. And I also want to thank you for the opportunity. And again, come back to Tracy, who started the ball rolling on this so many months ago, it seems now. And Bob for his help on the technical side, and Howard for kind of following through, and Terry yourself as well. Thank you for the opportunity to share my research. I appreciate the opportunity very much, and hope that you'll find the presentation of interest. I would just point out before we start that much of the interest has come from a TEDx talk that I did a couple of years ago in Vancouver on the same topic based on this presentation, but cut down to 10 or 12 minutes. What has frankly boggled my mind is that at this point, there have been over 4.5 million views of that talk, which tells me, first of all, it's very gratifying. And secondly, it tells me that there's tremendous interest in this topic out there. So I hope that it'll be helpful to you today. So we're talking about the 4 phases of retirement, but we're talking beyond dollars and cents. Everybody says that you have to get ready to retire financially, and of course you do. But what they don't tell you is that you also have to get ready psychologically. Who knew? But it's very important, as you'll see, and it's a topic that has had really very little discussion up until now, and hopefully today can change that a little bit. Let's start with a little bit of background. You know much of this information, but just as a reminder, first baby boomers, those of us born between 1946 and 1965, hit retirement age of 65 in 2011. And today, just under half of baby boomers have reached age 65. The final boomer will turn 65 in the year 2030. Because of this, what's going on, what's interesting is that today in North America, 10,000 North Americans will retire. And tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, until 2030, at which time things will slow down just a little bit. But when you think of 10,000 North Americans retiring every single day, it qualifies, I believe, as a retirement tsunami. That's what we're experiencing. At the same time, life expectancy continues to be extended. In 1950, which for frankly some of us doesn't perhaps seem all that long ago, average Canadian life expectancy was 68 years. So we could anticipate 3 years of retirement, which may account for the folks in the top right-hand corner of the screen here doddering their way towards their rocking chairs to live out their allotted 3 years. Things have changed substantially, as you can see. By 2000, that number had grown to 76, with anticipated 11 years of retirement, and then in 2010 up to 81 and 16 years of anticipated retirement, and in 2021, 82 and 17 years. We've had a little bit of a blip as a result of COVID, as you can see, but generally speaking, the years that one can expect to be alive have continued. And as I was just double checking on the accuracy of these figures, I just wanted to point out that they're provided by a combination of resources. They come from actuaries, statisticians, and accountants, not only at Stats Canada, but also at various insurance companies as well. And sometimes I'm asked the question, what's the difference between an actuary and an accountant? And I honestly wasn't able to be precise in my response. So I did a little bit of work. And the best that I've been able to come up with is that the essential difference between an actuary and an accountant is that an actuary didn't have enough personality to become an accountant. I think that's the basic difference that I've been able to discover. Um, Continue with life expectancy. Interestingly enough, the fastest growing age group in North America today is the plus 85 gang. And the second fastest group is the 100 plus gang. So it's pretty clear that many of you in the room there today can expect to live up to 1/3 of your life in retirement, quite likely in the range of 90 years, so about 30 years in retirement. What a difference from 1950 when it was 3 years. We're clearly an aging society, and here's further proof of that. A few years ago, Prudential Insurance Company set up in a park in Austin, Texas. And they created this huge board, as you can see. It's 10 or 12 feet high and 50 or 60 feet long. And they've marked it off at the top, as you can see, with different ages. And they've conveniently shown retirement age there vertically and numbers at the bottom. And as people began to wonder what was going on and they gathered around here, they distributed 400 round discs, kind of like a frisbee. And they asked people to put those discs on the wall to represent the age of the oldest living person that they know. So you can see what happened. Even if we consider average life expectancy now to be kind of, between 80 and 90, which it is, but notice where most of the discs were placed. They were placed to the right of that, indicating that they know people who had been living longer than that. So again, we're quite likely to be spending 1/3 of our lives in retirement, quite likely 30 years or so. And the question becomes, how do we do that? How do we spend that time meaningfully and productively rather than just kind of putting in time? I had a chance a couple of years ago to be with my mom on her 100th birthday. And I said to her, Mom, I said, I know of a lot of people who have turned 100. I've read about it, but you're the only person that I know who actually has reached that milestone. And she looked at me and she thought for a moment and she said, well, this is what it looks like. I thought she looked pretty good at 100, and she made it past 101 and within 2 months of 102 before she passed away. So let me tell you a story about how I got interested in all of this. I belong to a walking group, and we meet early in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, 3 days a week. And our primary purpose is to put 10,000 steps on our Fitbits. And then we go for coffee and, more importantly, cinnamon buns. That's the real attraction for me and for some others. But we've got in the habit during our walks of having questions or topics for discussion. And one day the topic for discussion was this one: how do you squeeze all the juice out of retirement? How's that for 7 o'clock in the morning? So we walked and we talked and we kicked it around, and the next day we moved on to the next topic. But the topic stayed with me because I was technically retired, whatever that means. I was busy enough, but I didn't really feel that I was doing anything that was particularly meaningful or productive. And so I thought I had a pretty good idea of what success looked like in a working career or in a domestic career, in a business career. But when it came to retirement, it was much fuzzier for me. It was fuzzy. And so I decided to do what I usually do when I'm trying to find an answer to a question. I do some research, and I looked at the prevailing retirement data literature that's out there. And not surprisingly, because it's still the case, that much of that relates to investments. It relates to estate planning. It relates to powers of attorney, and all of that stuff, which is critically important, but it's just not what I was looking for. So I decided that I would interview retirees, and I was referred to a number, but a dozen or so initially. And these were people that other retirees had said, oh, you should talk to them because they've got it all figured out. So I did. I put together a group of questions. My final question was always, how do you squeeze all the juice out of retirement? And I interviewed well over 100, 150, 160 people, and I kept getting referrals of other people that I should talk to. And so I interviewed these folks, and I had a massive amount of information. It took me about 3 years to do this, and then I had to try to make sense of it all. And what I discovered, good news, is I discovered that there is a framework and a pattern that can help if we know what we're looking for. And it's that framework that I want to share with you today in the hopes that it will be helpful to you as you deal with some of the predictable psychological changes and challenges that almost always accompany retirement. So you have in front of you this little sheet called the 99 game. And I'm going to ask you to take that, if you would, for a moment. And when I say go, but not quite yet, I'm going to ask you to find and circle number 1, and then find and circle number 2, and find and circle number 3, and so on. And I'm going to ask you to go as far as you can in ascending order from 1 to 99 in the next 30 seconds. Ready? Go. Now, I don't know whether you could hear it or not, but when we do this workshop live, we play the Jeopardy music. And at the end of the time, Alex always says pens down, which I will say now, pens down if you would. And I'm going to ask you, just by show of hands, how many got from number 1 to 99? And the answer is generally nobody. So then we cut it down and say, well, how many got to 50? Rarely. 40, 30, no. 20. At that point, maybe a couple. And I say that we don't want to go any further because the purpose of the exercise is not to cause undue embarrassment at all. It's just to kind of make a point. So now let me make a suggestion that might be of help. Let me suggest that you divide that sheet into approximate quarters, as you see there, approximate quadrants. And let me point out, this may be powerfully helpful if you haven't noticed it already, that number 1 is in the top right-hand quadrant, number 2 is in the top left-hand quadrant, number 3 is in the bottom left-hand quadrant, and number 4 is in the bottom right-hand quadrant, and so on. So now, with this newfound and powerful new information at your disposal, I'm going to ask you to pick up from where you left off at number 5 or 6 or whatever that was, and see how much further we can get in this second 30 seconds. Ready? Go. Okay. So let me ask, how many folks got further the second time than you did the first time? And almost everybody is in that category. And when we ask, well, how do you account for that? The responses tend to be, well, had a plan, or we knew what we were looking for, we knew there was a framework, and all of that, of course, is exactly the case. And that's what I'm hoping to provide for you this morning, is a framework that can help you look at retirement differently, especially from the psychological perspective than you might have in the past. So when we're finished our time together, you're going to know what the 4 phases of retirement are. And if you are retired, you will know which phase you're in. You'll also be equipped to identify which phase some of your friends and colleagues are in, and that's always fun. And if you're not retired, then you'll know at least what to expect when that time comes. You'll have a bit of a heads up. In our presentation, we're making 2 assumptions, which are critically important. I think you'll agree. Number one, we are assuming reasonably stable financial health. And number two, we're assuming reasonably stable medical health. I appreciate completely that lacking either or both of those, retirement can look very, very different. But with those 2 assumptions, let's have a look at the 4 phases of retirement. Phase 1, call it the vacation phase. It typically lasts 1 to 2 years. For me, it was just about 2 years dead on. It can be certainly much less than that for some folks and more for others. It tends to be that bucket list activities are predominating during phase 1, the vacation phase. And generally people have, got a list, either they've written it down or it's in their heads as to some of the things that they want to get done when they retire. And they often include, improving my golf game or my pickleball game, and maybe there are new golf clubs involved. Often there's a new sailboat involved, maybe a new sports car, sometimes even a warm weather property that can help us to get away from some of the inclement weather we get in the winter. One of the things that people really appreciate, according to my research, is that they appreciate having no set routine for the time being. Our lives are governed by routines. And every now and then, just like when you're on a vacation, that falls away, and you can do what you want. You can get up when you want, go to bed when you want, do what you want, if you want, when you want, where you want, with whom you want, that sort of thing. No set routine. And we love it for a while. So phase 1 is really kind of all about freedom. Okay, it's all about you, the individual. You've worked hard, and you're receiving some of the benefits of that now. And interestingly enough, it's important to note that phase 1 represents, for most people, their view of an ideal retirement. That's what all of the advertising tells us. We should be able to be cavorting along the beach with friends and loved ones. We should be drinking wine. We should be sailing into the sunset. All of that stuff. That's what people think is the ideal retirement, until it isn't. Because after a while, we begin to get a bit bored. Too much of a good thing can be too much of a good thing. We actually miss our routine. I'm convinced that there's something in us genetically that's wired to require a routine. And while we enjoy not having one for a while from time to time, deep down inside, we crave a routine. We want a routine. And so when those are kind of missing, and we're bored and we're missing our routine, we start to ask ourselves, like, is that all there is to retirement? I was told that this was what it was supposed to be all about. So when we start asking questions like that and feeling that way, we've kind of moved on. And one person described it to me as this. They said, retirement for me was a plunge into the abyss of insignificance. Maybe a bit over the top, maybe a bit dramatic, but there is no doubt that it has been proven medically and by research that retirement is one of life's top 10 traumas. Traumas. It's right up there with death of a spouse, with divorce, with a new job, with moving, all of those things. It is one of life's top 10 traumas, and we don't treat retirement as a trauma. We don't treat it that way. We need to start thinking about it as a real, more of a challenge than we've sometimes thought of it. So we're now in phase 2, and in phase 2, we feel loss and we feel lost. We, almost all of us, suffer 5 significant, virtually unavoidable losses, all directly related to retirement. We lose a sense of structure. And for a while, we're happy about that, but deep down, we need it, we want it. We lose our sense of identity because many of us identify with the work that we do or have done. And when that is taken away from us, a part of us is lost as well. We lose some of the relationships that we had established over the years, and some of those folks have become quite likely good long-time friends. Those things tend to be lost when we retire. There's a sense of purpose that many of us take from our jobs, our positions, our callings. We believe it's important. And when it's gone, we lose some of ourselves. And finally, some people lose a sense of power because perhaps over a period of time, they've built up some responsibility for personnel or for budgeting. But when they walk away from the job for the last time, they're just a guy or a gal in the street. Now, we don't see these losses coming, and we lose them all at the same time. It's like bang, dramatic, and it can get worse because at the same time, not directly related to retirement, but more to a time of life, which overlaps often with retirement, we suffer the 3 Ds. Depression. The world-famous Mayo Clinic has indicated through their research and reported that when you retire, there is a 40% likelihood that you will exhibit signs of clinical depression. Decline, physical decline. Quite possibly that silky smooth golf swing isn't so silky smooth anymore. And then there's mental decline. We start to forget things. Where did I put my keys? Honey, where's the remote? I gave you the remote. Where's the dog? We lose some of these things. And most shockingly of all to me was this one on divorce. In North America, divorces among people over 50 have doubled. And for those over 65, the rate has tripled since 1990. Amazing, amazing. Do you know the highest rate of suicide in Canada today? Men over 75. Highest rate of suicide. So we suffer these 5 unavoidable losses directly related to retirement. Then we add on the 3 Ds that are not directly related to retirement, but to a time of life. And a guy can feel like he's been hit by a bus, as you can see. Because it's true that before we can appreciate some of the positive aspects of phase 4 in particular, you are going to, or quite likely have, if you haven't already, experienced fear, uncertainty, anxiety. All the research says so. Certainly it was my experience and the experience of many of the people that I interviewed. So you got to buckle up and get ready for phase 2. But sooner or later, well, you need to buckle up in phase 2 is what you need to do. Going to be a rough road. But sooner or later, most of us at some point or another say to ourselves or to a significant other, hey, I can't go on like this. I don't want to spend the rest of my life, quite likely 30 years or so, feeling like this. And that ultimately, folks, is a good sign, because that's when the rehab begins. That's when we move from phase 2. We know that we just can't go on like this. We move into phase 3. And phase 3 is a time of trial and error. Trial and error. Phase 3, you know you're in phase 3 when you start to ask yourself questions like, what can I do to make my life meaningful and productive again? What's it going to take for me to want to get up in the morning again? How can I contribute? And it's important that we try different things to achieve that sense of well-being and satisfaction again. But it's also important to realize that it is unlikely that your first bright idea will be the idea that carries you forth to phase 4. It's quite likely not going to be that. Let me just share with you 2 or 3 examples from my own experience in phase 3. I served for a while on a condo board. You laugh. Until I got tired of being yelled at. Then I thought a little bit, well, maybe I'd like to go to law school. And I thought, well, gee, that's a long haul. And I thought, well, maybe I could be a paralegal, less time involved. And then I thought, yeah, I'm not sure I want to spend all my time kind of fighting over speeding tickets in small claims court. But there was an aspect of the paralegal training, which I'd begun, that really did intrigue me, and it had to do with mediation and with alternate dispute resolution. And I really thought that there was an opportunity there for me. I thought I could kind of make a bit of a contribution. I put a lot of time and effort into it, 2.5 years, and it went nowhere. It went nowhere. I love to write. And so I thought, well, maybe I could help people by putting together, people might want to write their memoirs or a family history or that sort of thing as they retire. So I put together a beautiful little program, if I may say so, called Getting Started on Your Memoirs. However, to date, it has achieved what they call limited success. Been a rocky road for me too, and I did tell you to buckle up. Yeah, that's phase 3, but you got to keep at it. Got to keep at it. Now, phase 4, that's what we're aiming for. That's where we reinvent and we rewire. Not everyone breaks through and reaches phase 4. My research tells me that only about 60%, 60 to 65% of retirees reach phase 4. Some remain in phase 1, only a very few number in my experience, in my research, stay in phase 1. Phase 2, some people stay there and they become part of those statistics that I cited. Many others try to get to phase 3. Sometimes they're successful and sometimes they do move on to phase 4. But I've seen some folks who try their hardest in phase 3, kind of bang their head against the wall for a while and then ultimately kind of give up and sink back to phase 2. That is not a pretty sight, and they become part of those statistics. So not everyone gets there, I think 60 to 65% approximately. But those who do are some of the happiest people I have ever known. That's why I'm so passionate about helping people get to phase 4. Phase 4, again, it's reinventing and rewiring ourselves. It requires answering some questions, some tough introspective questions, and we're not always good at introspection. You see, some people in my interviews, they had this idea that they worked hard all their lives and that in retirement, they're just going to coast. Well, coasting isn't satisfying over a long period of time. It's not over a 30-year period. You can't just coast. You've got to be intentional. And so you need to ask yourself tough questions like, what's the mission here? Like, what's my purpose? Why am I here? When was the last time you asked yourself some of those questions? If you have, good for you, you're well on your way. What's going to make me want to get up in the morning again? How can I squeeze all the juice out of retirement? And here's what I found. Overwhelmingly, it involves service to others. That distinguishes people in phase 4 from every other phase in my experience. Service to others. Winston Churchill is attributed with this phrase. He says, we make a living by what we get, we make a life by what we give. And that's really the concept. So I'd like you to refer back then to the handout, if you would. And but before we do so, just if you would have a look here at the big old target. And let me share some things that you may be feeling as well. On the outside here, there you can see things at which I'm incompetent. A large number, a huge number of things at which I am completely incompetent and happily so, to be honest. Same is probably true for you. As we move closer to the center, there's a smaller number of things that I do competently, and I suspect that you do too. For example, if called upon and under some pressure, I can deliver a reasonably good barbecued hamburger. Don't love it, but I can probably do it. Moving closer to the center, there is a smaller number of things that I know I do very well. But in the center is what I call unique ability. And I don't mean unique in the sense that no one else on earth has this ability. But what it identifies for me is this. What are the things that I love to do and know that I do exceedingly superbly well? Everybody has at least one of those things, sometimes two or maybe even three. But have you identified your unique ability? So that's what tool number one or strategy number one on the sheet is all about. What is your unique ability? What is it that you love to do and what do you do really well? That will help to uncover your unique ability if you don't know it already. And we don't have a lot of time to do it here, folks, but I do want to take maybe 60 seconds or so to allow you a chance to kind of get started on this. I encourage you to take these away. We found these to be very helpful. People take them away and they spend some more time on it when they have some more time. But just take 60 seconds. Let's do it just right now. And I'm going to ask you to make note of what are the things you love to do? What are the things you do really well? 60 seconds. Well, not 60 seconds, but you get the drift. We're going to move on. Second strategy, second tool, high points. I'm always amazed at this, and I'm going to ask you to, first of all, just think about just 5 successes, highlights, breakthroughs, victories that you have achieved so far in your life. Just 5. You could do 50 if you had some more time. I know you could, but just 5. Just 5. Take another 30 seconds. Successes, highlights, breakthroughs, victories. We can give you more paper if you need more paper. Okay, moving on. This one is intriguing to me because I find that we need to look at common threads. That is, we need to do things that we love to do, know that we do really well, and that have led to success. Interestingly enough, I find that over and over again, participants in our workshops don't see the connection. But to me, it's so obvious that the things that you love to do and do really well would lead to success. And so we just want to take an opportunity here at the bottom of the page. You can see that there's no, specific work on this one, but what I'm going to ask you to do is to look at things you've got down for unique ability, and then look at some of the things that you see for high points. And if you see that there's a connection between them, physically make that connection, if you would, with pen or pencil or whatever you have, but show yourself graphically, visually, that there is a connection between those two. There almost always is. So we need to look for those common threads. And finally, let's put it all together, because ultimately we need to find where it is that we need to want to spend our time. So we've talked about what you love. That's at 12 o'clock, as you can see. We've talked about what you're good at. That's at 9 o'clock. We've talked about past successes. That's at 3 o'clock, as you can see. And now it's important to consider what you can be paid for. And I don't necessarily mean financially, although that could be part of it. You might be working part-time or decide to work part-time or be paid for what it is that you do. That's fine. But for most people in phase 4, I find that it's more of a psychic payment. It's something, it makes them feel good when they do this. It just makes them feel good. It gives them a sense of accomplishment, of meaning, of significance. They love it. So what we need to do, as you can see, is where we've got these four overlapping circles, it's at the point where they intersect, that small point in the middle. That's what I call your sweet spot, or whatever you want to call it. But that's where you want to spend as much of your time in retirement as you can, where you combine the things that you love to do really well, that have led to success in the past, and make you feel good. I mean, what better combination can there be than that? That's what people in phase 4 experience. And it's beautiful to see over and over again. Interesting study done several years ago by the Harvard Business School. This was a 20-year longitudinal study involving 15,000 retirees. And they went back to these people every 5 years and asked a different set of questions based on the fact that people were moving on. And it's a voluminous study, as you can appreciate, and they were trying to find out what makes a successful retirement. And one phrase in particular jumped out for me of all the many pages in this report. But they reported that the unhappiest retirees had not gone on to do anything productive beyond pleasing themselves. Now, that is phase 1 behavior. There's a place for it. There's a place and a time for pleasing yourselves when you first retire, in the vacation phase, when it's all about you and you do your bucket list and all that stuff. There's a place and a time for it, but it's not the basis for a 30-year retirement. The unhappiest retirees had not gone on to do anything productive beyond pleasing themselves. Powerful statement. Powerful statement, and I've seen it over and over again. I think you'd agree, most of us need to find activities that we find meaningful and that give us a sense of purpose. And in our own way, as Steve Jobs put it several years ago, to put our own little dent in the universe, which likely isn't going to be as big a dent as Steve's was, but that's okay. So what might that look like? Well, there are a whole range of possibilities. I mean, you could support a charity, or I know one fellow that I interviewed, he works only on Friday evenings for 2 or 3 hours, and he delivers fresh, hot, steaming, delicious pizzas to people. And they love to see him coming, and he loves to make them happy because they're anticipating it. He gets great tips, but he's really not in it for that. It just makes him feel good. And he does it just for a couple of hours a week. Maybe you're mentoring students, maybe writing a book or your memoirs. Who knows? Those are all possibilities. And here are a couple more. A friend of mine, his name is Tim Burrows, and he has owned 2 or 3 electric vehicles. He was an early adopter, and he's owned some Teslas, and he has put together a program where he goes around and he visits church groups, school groups, probus groups, Rotary groups, and in this case, as you can see, a school group. And I mean, even these little kids know that when you lift up, the hood of a car, there's supposed to be a motor in there. And of course, there isn't in this case. But he enjoys that. He does a couple of dozen of these a year and just gets great satisfaction out of it. Here's another possibility that this might be more appealing, folks. Some of you might want to be old coots giving advice. Yeah. I love this one. It's probably bad advice, they say, but it's free. This is a real live group in Salt Lake City, Utah. And they used to meet on Saturday mornings in the deli owned by the fella on the left there with his sunglasses hanging on his chest. He owned a deli, and they would go there and they would drink coffee and eat bagels and solve many of the world's problems. And then the fellow in the right, in the red t-shirt, his background is as a teacher. And he said to them one day, and there are only a few of the old coots that are there. There's a larger number, about a dozen. But he said, folks, among us, we have tremendous breadth and depth of knowledge and experience and expertise, and we owe it to the world to be sharing that. So we're going to take a booth in the local farmers market, and we're going to dispense advice, and it'll probably be bad, but it's going to be free, and we're going to go. So they did that. As you can see, they're having their picture taken there. They got off to a somewhat slow start. One of their first visitors was a kid, a 10-year-old, who wanted help with his math homework on his tablet, which set some of them back, but they did their best. And now, according to this fellow, they are the most popular booth in the farmers market. And that's proven by the fact that they now have, are you ready? They now have their own weekly podcast, Old Coots Giving Advice, and they're available on all the podcast platforms that you might want to listen to. That's what those folks are doing. I had an opportunity just before COVID to go on a water mission. I work with with Water Ambassadors of Canada, and our job is to provide clean drinking water to those who don't have it. And so we had an opportunity to go for a week to Honduras, and our mission was not to drill wells, but in this case to repair 8 wells that had been drilled in the 1980s by the Japanese government as a humanitarian gesture and had just over the time just quit working. There was no rehab built into the whole thing, so it just quit working. And these had been identified for us by our on the ground guy who had identified the towns where we would be going. And so in this case, I'm busy sterilizing the plastic pipes, which are going to take the place of the rusty old steel pipes that my colleagues in the background are taking out. And we were able to repair 7 of the 8 wells during the time that we were there, providing clean drinking water to over 2,200 villagers who, in many cases, had never had access to clean drinking water in their little villages previous to that. We were also able to provide hygiene training to moms and to some of the older kids. About 300 of them had some hygiene training. So it was just a wonderful, most gratifying experience. We were only able, as I say, to repair 7 of the 8 wells. The 8th well was simply more than we could handle with the equipment that we had. But if all goes well, as it did in this case, we could repair a well in about 4 hours. And there we have the new well head is in place, and even those little kids can pump the well, and everybody's a happy camper. I hadn't realized before I got involved with this group that contaminated water is the world's biggest cause of death and disease, and the easiest to fix. Just give people clean drinking water, and we do that through drilling wells, through repairing wells, by providing filtration for water that they might have access to. It's a wonderful organization, and it's a very gratifying involvement that I have. That's not a regular kind of activity, as you can imagine, but on a regular basis, I show up at our local hospital every Friday morning between 8 and 12, and I'm part of what we call the welcome team. And my job is to welcome people who are in the hospital. We know that very few people come to the hospital for the fun of it. Most of those who need our help are there under duress, under pressure. They perhaps don't know where they're going, and they need help. And so our job is to not give them directions as to what part of the hospital they should be going to, but wherever we can to take them there. And I can just tell you how gratifying it is to see the relief on people's faces when you say, oh, I can take you there. And they love it. And it's, again, a very gratifying experience for me. And in addition to which I put 10 or 11,000 steps on my Fitbit. Rick Warren, a pastor and a well-known author, best-selling author, he nailed it, in my opinion, when he said the only really happy people are those who have learned how to serve. It's just as simple as that. That is the distinguishing characteristic of people in phase 4. So remember, as we kind of pull things together here, you're not alone in this transition. There are 10,000 North Americans retiring every single day. And you have more options to consider, and probably longer to consider them and to put them into action than you've ever had before in recorded human history. And we have such a huge opportunity to kind of make a difference, to combine the things that we're good at, that we love to do, and make a difference. It's just such a wonderful opportunity, and it represents the most satisfying and gratifying part of retirement. And that leads me to the final story I want to share with you, my friend Bill. Bill is a neighbor of mine in a Florida community that we are in. Bill spent 40 years inflicting pain. He was a dentist. But as you can tell by this image, he's not inherently a pain-inflicting kind of a guy, and he certainly is not. But in our community of about 900 doors, probably 1,800 people or so, he believed that there was a tremendous breadth and depth of experience and expertise, and that we should be doing more than just playing golf. I mean, ours is a golf community, and that's the central focus of it. But he had this idea that there could be a lot more to it. And so he had this idea that if you approached people and asked them to share with others things that they love to do and do really well, that they would do so. They would volunteer and they would agree to do so. And so he did that. And in the first year, there were 9 programs that started. One was oh, pardon me. Oh, gosh. Should have done that previously. Sorry, nobody ever calls me except when I'm occupied. Bill put together this program that provided opportunities, 9 programs, one of which was a lady volunteered to teach oil painting. Another one volunteered to teach bridge, another to mahjong. There was a bicycle repair clinic. Bill was an early adopter of eye technology, so he did a program on iPhones and iPads. We knew that a lot of our members had been given these things by their children for Christmas presents and that they barely knew how to open them. We couldn't accommodate all the people who showed up for that program. But in the first year, 9 programs, 200 people got involved in our community. Next year, the number of programs grew exponentially from 9 to 45. And the number of people involved grew from 200 to 700. And in the third year, believe it or not, there were over 90 programs, double the year before, and over 2,100 registrations, which just shows what one person can do when they want to provide service to others. It's an amazing story. And our one sheet, 8 by 10 pages that started in the first year have grown, as you can see. Bill's holding a 36-page glossy catalog of all the offerings that are now available in our community. It's a wonderful phase 4 story. And here's the other really great thing about phase 4. Remember we talked about the 5 losses, the 5 unavoidable losses of phase 2. We lost structure, identity, relationships, purpose, and power. Well, Bill has discovered that they've all been regained and enhanced. He has a new structure for his life. He's no longer the guy that imposes pain. He's got a new structure for his life, putting together learning programs. He's got a new identity as the guy that gets things done. He's built new relationships. When you approach 50, 75 people a year and ask them if they'll help out, you're going to create some new relationships, and he's got a new sense of purpose. He loves what he's doing and enhancing our community. And although Bill couldn't care less about power, he's made a powerful change in our community. No doubt about that. That's the magic of phase 4. So to tie it all together, you now know what the 4 phases of retirement are. If you're retired, you know what phase you're in. If you're not, you know what to expect when the time comes. You've got a bit of a heads up. You have some tools that you can use to get you to phase 4 if you wish to do so, and I urge you to do so. It's the most gratifying, satisfying phase of retirement. And so, final piece of advice, don't retire. At least not in the traditional way, where you head to the rocking chair and wait your time. No, no, no. You've got way too much time. You've got to do something that makes you feel good about it. And so the recommendation is rewire. Take the things that you love to do and that you do really well. Take the things that make you feel good, that give you a sense of well-being and satisfaction and accomplishment, and maybe apply them in a different area than you've ever applied them before. There are so many opportunities out there for you to do that. So Everyone says you have to get ready to retire financially, and of course you do. But what they don't tell you is that you also have to get ready psychologically. So enjoy your vacation in phase one. Be prepared for the losses that are going to hit you in phase two. Experiment and try as many options as you can in phase three, and squeeze all the juice out of retirement in phase four. Thanks, folks. Appreciate the opportunity to share with you.